I'm joined now by member of the House Intelligence Committee, Jim Himes. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thanks for having me, Brian.
So we have some breaking reporting right now that, in fact, the attacks that the U.S. waged against Iran's nuclear facilities did not obliterate the centrifuges, that they're largely intact, and that the nuclear program might only be set back a few months. This is being reported by CNN right now. Can I have your reaction first and foremost to this breaking news?
Yeah. The news that you're referring to refers to a classified report, so I'm going to steer clear of confirming or not confirming the CNN reporting. But let me tell you this: the Iranian regime is not dumb. This raid, this U.S. attack, was broadcast fairly well in the days to come. There are commercial satellite images of trucks pulling up to the entrances at Fordo. You can kind of draw your own conclusions. And, I'll just close by saying that the administration is using some pretty extravagant language. The word that keeps coming up is obliteration. If obliteration means that we dropped very big bombs on mountains and facilities and caused a lot of smoke and damage, that is probably true. If obliteration means that we have very badly set back Iran's ability, if they chose to do so, to build a nuclear weapon, let's just say that I have not seen any evidence to suggest that that is the case. And of course, these are early days. It will take a long time to know, if we ever know, by the way, that the uranium was scattered, or precisely how many centrifuges were destroyed. And that raises some real questions. We're all sort of focused on the possible horror of, a massive Iranian military attack on our naval base at Bahrain or at the air base at Al Udeid. I frankly am much more worried about what happens if the Iranians go dead silent for the next 6 months. We don't hear a peep. And yet they have concluded, not irrationally, they have concluded that they've got to go the North Korean route or the Pakistani route and just develop a weapon in secret. And 7 or 8 months from now, we learn about what actually happened because there is a nuclear test in Iran. That to me right now is both a plausible and sort of extreme downside scenario.
And so wouldn't it lend itself to reason that the plan that we had in place with Barack Obama, the JCPOA, which would actually allow inspectors into the country and we would get some insight into what they're doing, would be a better alternative than basically pushing Iran toward the North Korea route, which is to make them this hermit kingdom where nobody has any insight into what they're doing. They go dark for 6 months and then, suddenly emerge with nuclear weapons.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's not a debatable fact. And I understand that the JCPOA, the Iran nuclear deal signed under Barack Obama, I understand it was controversial. Of course, it would have been great if it had been stronger. But it is not debatable that it is one thing in my lifetime, the one thing in my lifetime that has actually slowed the Iranian roll towards a nuclear weapon. They shipped all of their, not all of their uranium, but almost all of their uranium to Russia. They stopped their centrifuges, and Donald Trump, in his first term, decided that it wasn't good enough. So he tore up that agreement, urged on by the Israeli prime minister, and both of those men have now taken a different tack. Starting with the Israeli attacks and, of course, followed up by the American attacks. Now, by the way, to be fair here, we're talking about this is pretty speculative. Maybe. It will transpire that that this really meaningfully did set back the Iranian program, or even I know the president doesn't want to sort of go there, but even maybe the Iranian people decide that they've had enough of this regime. So a good outcome is still possible, but you wouldn't be looking at the history of the region and our activities there to say, oh, well, that's very probable, right?
Yeah.
Don't go the way we want them to go in Libya, in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in Syria.
What do you make of the fact that, there are all these reports that for weeks the Iranians knew what was coming, and the New York Times just did a couple of reports basically saying that Donald Trump's posts were the biggest obstacle to operational security, and that, in fact, Iran was able to move 880 pounds, 400 kilograms of enriched uranium, up to 60% out of these facilities before the strikes even hit. And so what do you make of the fact that Donald Trump was so incapable of just having a modicum of discretion to the point where he basically tipped his hand to the very country that we would go on to bomb?
Yeah, and we had I'm going to put off the decision for 2 weeks, and we are all running around saying, is this another, exhibition of Taco Trump? He chickens out. But the point is that the Iranians have had many weeks, starting with well before the Israeli attacks, right? I mean, we were talking about the possibility of an Israeli attack on Iran well before they actually did it. So again, these may be evil people, but they are not stupid people. And the fact that we were sort of wondering whether the attack was going to become on Monday or Tuesday, it would, I'll say what I said before, it would not surprise me one bit if the Iranians managed to preserve enough of the centrifuges, the weaponization technology, and enough of the 60% uranium that we may end up being very badly surprised down the road.
If we're in a situation where these attacks didn't cause the obliteration that Trump promises they caused, and that in fact it's true that CNN is reporting that their nuclear program, Iran's nuclear program, was only set back a few months, then what does it mean moving forward for an Iranian regime that now has every tendency in the world to be able to strike back at Israel, at the United States, because of the fact that we've taken a hostile and aggressive posture toward them?
Right. So, I mean, put yourself in the shoes of the Iranian regime. Not hard to do, right? There's basically two doors you can walk through, and this has been true for 30 years. You can walk through the diplomacy door and negotiate, and maybe you get sanctions lifted and your country does a little better because you agree to ship the uranium out of your country or whatever. Or you go down the route of not negotiating and trying to develop a weapon. Now, that always comes with the risk of a military attack. But now the Iranian regime has seen two things. Diplomacy doesn't work, right?
Right.
Years of negotiation to get to the JCPOA, which I'll say it again, is the one thing that has ever slowed the Iranian roll. And Trump tears it up. And then in the middle of negotiations, the Israelis attack. So if you're an Iranian regime member, you say to yourself, okay, that is not the most salubrious door to walk through. And then you say, hey, Ukraine gave up their weapons. Russia was one of the signatories to the guarantee of the sovereignty of Ukraine. And look what Russia did. North Korea used to fear a U.S. invasion. Now they have 60 nukes and they don't fear a U.S. invasion quite as much anymore. And so anyway, the broader lessons out there, if you're a member of the Iranian regime, is that you develop a nuke in secret. And last night, when we heard that there might be a ceasefire, what a perfect environment for the Iranians to say, oh yeah, absolutely, no, ceasefire, nothing else, as long as the Israelis don't break it. And now they have an uninterrupted, quiet period of time in which to do what the North Koreans and the Pakistanis and the Indians did, right? Which was to develop a weapon in secret. So again, I am watching the administration just pop the champagne cork, say obliteration, and do the high fives, thinking to myself, you guys may have just set up the worst case scenario.
What do you make of the fact that we have Republicans now falling over themselves to award Donald Trump the Nobel Peace Prize in light of everything that we're finding out right now?
We don't have enough time to talk about that. What I will say is two things. Number one, very smart people who study the Middle East say it is often years before the true outcome, in particular of a military action. You will remember, and I certainly remember, when George W. Bush landed on an aircraft carrier and declared mission accomplished over Iraq. Well, a couple of years later, his approval ratings are 26%. We've got 4,400 dead Americans because of Iraq. And so, point one is, let's wait before the champagne comes off the ice. Number two, it's just so pathetic. I enjoy serving in Congress because I am to act as a check and a balance, constitutionally speaking, on the president. And I've been willing to do that with Democratic presidents. I was one of the first members of the House of Representatives to say that Joe Biden shouldn't run again. That's my job. And to see these guys falling all over themselves, not just to do whatever Donald Trump tells them to do, the isolationists saying like, oh, well, this is great. It's a great military strike. It's just frankly pathetic is what it is.
Yeah. What do you make of the fact that Mike Johnson had come out and when asked about the fact that that Trump had gone forward with this strike against Iran without consulting Congress? Of course, it's Congress's prerogative to be able to declare war. That Mike Johnson basically just defended Trump's ability to do that and said this is all contained within his Article 2 powers, basically foregoing his own role in the legislative branch as a check on the executive branch.
Yeah, look, am I one bit surprised? No. Mike Johnson is entirely a creature, and his speakership relies entirely on the power of Donald Donald Trump. And that's true of almost every single Republican member here. They are here not to serve as a check or a balance, not to legislate. They are here to do Donald Trump's bidding. That is, not even a debatable proposition anymore. It's just very sad in a country that always cared about the division of power between the legislature. Look, this point about, it's a legitimate exercise of his Article 2 authority. You can read the War Powers Act. It's out there and publicly available. And it says that the president can act in an offensive way if Congress has declared war or authorized it, or if there's an immediate attack on the country. So again, not a debatable point. We can talk about whether the Constitution is set up rightly, but the Constitution is set up to vest this kind of decision in the Congress, not in the Oval Office.
We'll leave it there. Congressman, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thanks a lot.